So wait, Skipoli, we can't go too long without doing any Latin language work. You guys have had a ton of history over the last few days. But we're going to cover the Proelium story that rounds out chapter 9 and, shows our Roman, more or less, shows our Roman defeat of Boudica and her forces. Of course, all this stuff is taking place during the Empire, right? Who is the emperor that fights against Boudica? Oh man, we're gonna have to Google that real quick. She died in 61. Nero should have been the emperor at that time. And that makes sense, as your textbook takes place in 64, right? Just a few years later. Yeah, of course. So it wasn't during Claudius's reign. It was during Nero's reign. Anyway, just wanted to confirm that. And you didn't watch a video on the empire, right? You learned about the kings and the last king of Rome and an overview of the Republic and the Punic Wars, which were one of the most significant conflicts during the Republic. And most Roman history stories and people that you've heard of are probably living during the Republic, including Julius Caesar, right? But then his nephew Augustus becomes the first emperor. Tiberius is our second emperor. A guy named Claudius, aka Caligula, is our third emperor. Gaius, aka Caligula, is our third emperor. Claudius is our fourth emperor, and he annexes Britain. And Nero is the fifth emperor at the time your textbook is taking place, and at the time of Boudica's rebellion, right? So Claudius had already made Britain part of Rome, and then some things happened, and we had rebellions in Britain, and one led by Boudica. So back to this. So we've got her yelling, Hodie victoria est nobis, and it's literally like, today victory is for us, or there is victory for us. We could also say in English, without making this sound especially dative, right, because that is dative, to or for us, we could say victory is ours. It's a little expression called the dative of possession, even though the genitive is typically our possessive case. We can say victory is, and make this to or for us sound a little bit more possessive than it is. Not a term you need to know, but like that makes the most sense as far as understanding this sentence. But the literal is fine too. Victory is for us, right? There is victory to us or for us. And somebody in the crowd shouts, "Why Romanis? Woe to the Romans. Woe for the Romans," right? It's going to suck for them. And so then we get our captions. Imperator Proelio optimum locum legit. Now we know lego legere as to read. That's not going to make sense in this sentence. We're going to need its other definition. Lego legere legi lectum can also mean to choose, and it gives us words like elect and select from that last principal part, lectum, as much as we get things like lecture, right? So words that have to do with reading and words that have to do with choosing come from this verb. And this is from the third principal part, legi, with that long E. You can click on it and see lego, legere, legi. So it's not present tense, lego, legis, legit, right? Because it's third, we'd change it to an I. We can actually tell from the long E that it's from legi, legisti, legit, perfect tense. So the commander chose the direct object, the optimum locum, the best place. Proelio here must be dative case, right? For the battle. And also when I click on it, the book tells me, oh, that's dative. And it's also neuter. And it's also singular, but that's easy. So second declension, eo for dative case. Chose the best place for the proelium, for the battle. Britanni, subject, clamorem ingentem, direct object verb. We're raising a clamorem ingentem. Boudica, principes agentes, incitabat, was urging on or exciting the chiefs and the tribes, is how we're going to translate principes agentes. And we get this Roman dude on his side, and he goes, hostes sunt multi, right? The enemies are many. We are, I guess. We have to assume that the Romans leave out words when they're not necessary. The enemies are many, we few, but we are few. Necesse est, and there's our dative, right, is necessary for us to pugnare cum magna virtute. And I don't think we need the cum here because we want to say this is how we're fighting. It's not hanging out with us, but it's in a virtuous way. So it should just be ablative. But when you get an adjective describing your ablative, it's more common to get a cum with it. Oftentimes in the middle, like magna cum virtute would be all right also. But anyway, with magna virtute. And then our next caption, the imperator was parabating the exercitum. There's our dative for Proelio. And again, we can read left to right like a Roman. The emperor was doing something for battle. Oh, the army for battle. What was the commander doing to the army for battle? Was preparing the army for battle. So the verb ties it in for us at the end, but for Roman, they're like, okay, the commander's doing something for battle, something with the army, preparing the army for battle. That makes sense. The whole army, to or for the commander, a big clamorem, and then our verb raised, right? Tolo, tolere, sustuli. We had it up here in tolebant, imperfect tense, from that stem, and sustulit from the third principal part stem. Raised, a loud shout for the commander. The Copiae Britannicae, towards the Exercitum Romanum, fortiter curebant. Then this is an adverb, right? We're running bravely. The Imperator, the commander, signum dated, gave a signum. Primo, at first, adverb, milites in Britannos, pila iecerunt. The soldiers iecerunt, and you can see in the picture, right, through their pila, which must be neuter plural accusative. It must be the direct object here, so it must be from pilum, right, in the neuter plural accusative, through their javelins into or at the Britannos. Denda, then, great connector words here, right? Primo, first. Denda, then, the equites, hostis, could be dative to or for spears, could also be ablative with spears. That's going to make a lot of sense. And notice there's no cum, because I'm not like with spears, but they're my instrument. So then the equites, the cavalry, okideirunted the Britannos with spears. Tum, another great connector word, at that time or then, et milites et auxiliares, both the soldiers and the auxiliary forces. Gladiis is probably ablative with gladiuses, hostes opugnaverunted, right? Like attacked the hostes with their gladiis. Mox, another good connector word. Soon, the exercitus Romanus, subject, Britannicas copias, object, verb, delewit, right? So, of course, the Roman army, we knew what was going to happen, right? It was going to destroy the British forces. So we get this special little episode here. Gisco, right, is chiming in to tell the story. He says, in media caede, in the middle of the slaughter. Media is an adjective that goes with its noun. In middle slaughter, right, in the middle of a slaughter. I, Lucum conspexi, right, I caught sight of, or I spotted Lucas. Uni infelici, that's a third declension noun. So that's dative, and then my adjective is also a third declension by coincidence, and so that's it in the dative too, right? So that's the unlucky young man in the dative case. Parcere means to spare, and it's on that short list of verbs that we said are going to take dative direct objects. So to spare the young man, you'd expect him to be accusative, but instead he's dative because this verb takes the dative. To spare the unlucky young man. At first, volebam, I was wanting to parcere the uni infelici. But then, gladium conspexi, I spotted the gladius, right? That one that he took. Iratissimus eram. Sceleste, clamavi, I clamavied. And then UNM ocidi, right? With a normal direct object. I killed the young man because I saw that sword that he stole. This is actually reminiscent of an episode in the Aeneid. Aeneas, of course, the guy that escaped from Troy and brought a bunch of Trojan refugees across the Mediterranean, stopped in a lot of places, stopped in Carthage and lived with Dido for a while, and eventually made it to Italy, where he actually had to fight a war against some of the local Latin population that was already there. They were like, we don't want you Trojans just like taking our land, and there's some fighting and allies made and all kinds of stuff happening back and forth. And there was a guy that had killed a friend of Aeneas's son and had taken his belt, or, you know, his like all of his armor and spoils, as one does. And when Aeneas was given the opportunity to spare this dude in battle, like he could have just, you know, taken him as a prisoner of war, he sees the belt and he's like, I can't. This is like, I gotta kill this dude. And so it's a big thing. It's a significant moment at the end of the Aeneid where you're like, you know, Aeneas is supposed to spare, you're supposed to spare people who are at your mercy, right? You're not supposed to kill them if you don't need to. And the Aeneid even uses this word parcere. Aeneas' father had given him some advice about sparing those who are subject to you. and vanquishing those who are too proud. And so Aeneas sees that belt and he decides to vanquish the dude instead of sparing him, and it's a whole thing. There was also a good reading in this chapter since it mentions soldiers and auxiliary forces. I think we had a little note on who legionaries and auxiliaries were. So it's worth going back and looking at that and seeing some of the organization of the Roman army that's mentioned in there, as well as the reading on other uprisings against the Roman Empire, especially Vercingetorix and the Gauls, because that's a pretty famous battle. But that's it for our Proelium story. Gratias.